Ojo Aba Meta Meta, third Saturday in October, 29th in Seawall, Galveston, Texas. Galveston, formerly known as Turtle Island, was a marketplace block for selling human cargo during the transatlantic slave trade. That cargo was many of our ancestors who never chose to be enslaved. We must not let this truth of history be revised, and there were others of our ancestors who were already here, drying their eyes from trails of tears. Fourth Saturday in autumn equinox, Libra season, third decan, harvest season. The season where Onile, or the spirit of Mother Earth, thins the veil between Orun, heaven, and earth. Aye. The collective voice of our ancestors amplify their presence, hence All Hallows Eve, Halloween, Dia de los Muertos, and Sankofa, the caravan to the ancestors. These celebrations all fall like leaves off a tree during this season. Sankofa. It means to go back. It means to go back to give thanks and praises to the Creator, regardless of the name in which we call him/her. To remember our ancestors, the ones we know not by name, and their ultimate sacrifice. We go back to remember our recent ancestors and the wisdom their lives left behind. We go back to reflect on where we've been, to be clearer on where we are headed. And this is my personal diary of the last decade of experiences while attending the Sankofa Caravan to the Ancestors, hosted by the Houston chapter of the National Black United Front, and how these experiences changed my life. I'm my Aunt J. Muse, and you are watching and listening to Sankofa Mewa, the Diary of 10 Caravans. Ashe. Sankofa 2010. The beauty, the warning, and the offering. Pataki. O mio jo abameta, o wara meridi logo. Odunek bawa mewa, meridi lokbono joek baoru. Diary. Today is Saturday, October 16th, 2010, 26 days into autumn equinox. The day vibrated on an 11-2, a day of spiritual mastery. The moon was waxing in the 11th house of Aquarius, and it was a 3-year. My very first caravan to the ancestors was caravan number 13. That adds up to 4, a number so divinely aligned with my destiny. This year's Sankofa was in memorial tribute to Dr. Imari Abubakari Obadere, focusing on land, power, reparations, and self-determination. And it was one of the most beautiful Saturdays of my life. It was new, and one of the very first times in my life I felt my spirit elevate, then open up. There were many familiar embraces from spiritual family that I never met. Love and mystery were all in the air. Universal, spiritual, and even intimate. I love how our people gaze at each other with our eyes. It's hard not to desire something when everyone looks so gorgeous. I put that part in this diary so we could stop looking at that as a bad thing, and just something that needs to be balanced. After all, it was a relationship that led to my first time coming to Sankofa, Caravan to the Ancestors. It was an action-packed year for me, a prophesied rebirth that changed my vision of dragonflies, Ogun taking my car away and changing my life's roads, and being at a crossroads where blood ties with my direct bloodline, I had no idea how much I needed this. We arrived on the beach as the officiating priests were collectively administering the all-faiths prayer. I had never seen anything like it before, and I praised the divine for the sight. There were Christians, Buddhists, Muslims, those of the Asar-Asid faith, Ifa Orisha priests, all together in the name of one God, one goddess, void of all the quarrels as to whose belief was more real. It was the first time I saw us literally as one nation under a groove. I could feel my inner rhythms tune in to that which my DNA always knew, but foreign to my surface level of understanding. I blame it on the drums. I removed my shoes and felt my energy fuse from a B sharp to a B flat. I don't know what the hell I believe in, to be natural and the divinity I've always been. And as a transitioning Christian, I knew a thing or three about laying my burdens down by the riverside and wading in the water, but this was a whole other ballgame. Why? Because this was its origin. I gazed upon two seas. One was Mother Ocean's currents on the backdrop of Father Sky's glow. The other was a sea of beautiful indigenous people dressed in white. It was like, it was just nothing like anything I'd ever experienced. In the midst of all the mingling, my mate and date decided to quote-unquote have me looked at by a traditional practitioner. I had no idea really what that meant, and I was skeptical because I was still shaking off the teaching that such things were sinful and demonic, although it was normal for people to come to me for advice all the time. It just wasn't on this level. The next thing I knew, this strange man started walking in circles around me. My man at the time gave me a look of reassurance to match my glare of alarm. I then gave the same alarming look to the lady who was with the priest who was circling me. She gave me a similar reassuring look that all was well. This was new. I checked in with my spirit. My spirit told me to just see what would happen. So I allowed myself to shed some fear that was attached to religious indoctrination. The priest circled me 3 times before coming into the center of the circle where I was standing. He removed his sunglasses and beamed deeply into my eyes. I simply stared right back, and neither of us blinked for about 30-45 seconds. He closed his eyes. He nodded his head. He put his sunglasses back on and went back over to my man. I watched them talk, but I did not hear what was said. It later came back to me from both parties that the priest's revelation about me was actually a warning to him. A warning that I was wielding some kind of strong quote-unquote ashe that I was unaware of, and that mistreating me would not go well for him. The funny thing was, the intention of having me looked at was to reveal whether or not my love was loyal to him, and I was just learning what ashe was, and I had no idea how to see myself as wielding power, as Christian women were to be modest, humble, docile, nearly silent. It was a warning I would never hear the end of until this power was revealed, and unfortunately, it was a warning that my mate failed to heed. Back in the main circle, I noticed that people were going over to a table, grabbing handfuls of beans, grains, and fruits and taking them to the water. Others were going into the water. Some were praising, others wept. People were embracing, singing, doing all forms of praise. It was truly beautiful. However, I was not yet open to participate in group ritual, so instead, I walked a ways down the beach where I could have a moment alone. I walked away from everybody, just me, the sand, the water, and the wind. I walked until my spirit told me to stop. The drums and the crowd were more in the far distance, and as I listened to the wind, I meditated on the waves and what sacrifice and offering meant to me. Usually the first thing that came to mind when I thought of sacrifice was the sacrifice of Christ. That vision dissolved into visions of crosses and nooses, my grandfathers hanging from trees, my grandmothers working their fingers to the bone, ever silent in their trauma and suffering. Then it hit me hard, documented before my eyes 1,000,000 times over. My ancestors were and are my Jesus. They died for me, literally. I shed tears of gratitude for this truth, and I saw my Father's face. Now I knew enough about ancestor offerings to make an offering of foods my father loved, so I did that in private, and I did one thing more. I brought a very important piece of paper that represented my ultimate offering to the spirit world. I stepped into the water enough to cover my ankles and prayed until my tears were one with the sea. I laid the paper on the water and watched the sea carry it away until it was no longer in sight. And as I made my way back to the dispersing crowd, I felt much lighter, stronger, more aware, feeling that first taste of Ashe the priest may have been talking about. A group of women embraced me before we left, and they told me the sea's name, Yemanja. Ashe.